the Asia Pacific Business Forum podcast, exploring business, policy, and personalities across the region.
I'm Dick Drobnick, and I'm the host of this Asia Pacific Business Forum podcast conversation with Dr. Narongchai Akrasanee, a world-famous Thai economist who's been the former Minister of Commerce of Thailand, the former Minister of Energy of Thailand. He's the chairman of Thailand's Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, and he's also the board chairman of two private sector firms, as well as being the chairman of the board of a major university, Konkan University in Northeast Thailand. Dr. Narongchai, welcome to this podcast on what President Trump has called Liberation Day.
Yes, Dick. Thank you very much for your welcome.
A day in which he announced tariffs on all other nations, ranging from the UK at 10% and China to 54%, and even Thailand at 36%, as well as the sectoral tariffs that he's implemented on autos and aluminum and steel before. So as an economist, a thinker, a leader in Thailand and a leader in Southeast Asia, what are some of your thoughts about how these tariffs will impact these economies and what these economies might do to respond?
Thank you for that question. It's the impact on the economy and impact on myself. I rather focus on the impact on myself, which would have implication of the impact on the economy. As you know very well, I was born in the era of Americanization, Americanism, American globalization. I was very much a strong supporter of the U.S. from my teenage years. And my first job was working for Voice of America. And that was in 1961 when Kennedy became president. And I was the one responsible for distributing the speech of JFK, and I still remember how impressed I was with what he said. And I have been following what he advocated at the time. If you recall, he, after Eisenhower, he was trying to correct the image of the so-called ugly American. And in his speech, in addition to what he said about what the U.S. people, or the Americans should do for their country, he also said about the citizen of the world. I remember that very well. That he asked the citizen of the world to support what he called liberty and freedom. So stuck in my mind about liberty, liberation, is JFK.
Yeah.
So
no,
when I yes.
Let me mention my relationship with JFK.
Yes, please.
In late October of 1960, he was finishing his presidential campaign.
Campaigning, yes.
In a town near me. So I left school that day, and I went to the campaign rally. And when he finished his speech, and he mentioned he was going to create the Peace Corps, which he had talked about 2 weeks earlier. When he finished his speech, I was able to shake hands with him and pat him on the back and say, "Good luck, Jack." And then 6 years later, I joined the Peace Corps.
You see, so you were the
Malaysia.
product of his campaign or of his speech.
Yes.
I was very much the product of his speech in my career, And since then, I think you would notice all that I have done, being about the so-called, I would call it American-led globalization.
Yes.
In economic, in democracy, in everything. And that has been my career, In Thailand, I was promoting liberalization, free trade. I was against protectionism. That's what I learned about my dissertation at Johns Hopkins. Against protection. Not good for economy to have high tariff, protecting your industry, because at the end, the people pay for higher prices, the economy pay for inefficiency, and so on. And I was strong in promoting this idea through regional cooperation. So I would say that the globalization that we achieved, which resulted in a big economic development in many of the countries that the US wanted to see develop, China in particular, ASEAN second, not of course, not to mention many other so-called newly industrializing countries like Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and so on, plus even India. India liberalized in 1991 because of this American-led globalization, and we have all benefited from this. Of course, it's true that the US might think that we benefited too much relative to what they had or relative to what they lost, But I think we owe a lot. We meaning all these so-called newly emerging economies, the developing country in those years, and now many of them very much developed, more developed than before. We owe a lot of that to American-led globalization. And now this is being slowed down or about to be taken away. How much? I don't know yet. But definitely it will have impact upon us. So this will be my so-called feeling personally, professionally about the change.
Do you think that large countries will reciprocate, or you think they'll cave in and not reciprocate?
Well, I think if you analyze and to be fair, to be frank, I think if you analyze the trade regime resulting from the so-called globalization, some of them have not, many of these countries, have not opened up the economy as much. Now, when we say open up the economy, there are two things about it, or three things actually. One is about tariff. I think they have opened up economy in terms of tariff. The number that Trump said this morning, and exaggeration. We don't have that kind of high tariff. Depending on how you calculate the non-tariff barriers and so on, And the number he said is not a weighted average. It's some kind of maybe general average or something. Anyway, tariff, I think, very much open. Thailand is a classic case. I worked on that. Much lower than before. Evidence. Lots of imports available. You've seen that in Bangkok. You've seen that in Thailand. So many things imported, available everywhere. How could that happen? You see, so tariff. Non-tariff, yes, there's some still there in many of the products, sensitive things. That should, I think, be adjusted. And in particular, the exchange rate. What we forgot as economists, as a so-called free trade economists, we assume that exchange rate would adjust according to trade balance. Surplus exchange rate, the surplus country will go up, deficit exchange rate of the deficit country will go down. Exchange rate have not adjusted, partly because of government interference, partly because of the power of US dollar as the means of transaction. So those things I think we need to work on. React, retaliate, maybe some, but I don't think much. I think we should focus the thing about some going to the extreme, yes, but hopefully we can adjust some of these so-called things that we should have adjusted so that it become more normal. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So from that point of view,
yes,
you're saying that the shock of the Trump announcement,
yes,
and as they begin to implement, that will bring Thailand and Indonesia and South Korea to reconsider their non-tariff barriers or reconsider their currency policies.
I think that should be happening. That should happen. I don't think there would be real so-called, anti-US reaction in a way that counter increasing the tariff against the US and so on. I hope anyway. that we will pay more attention to the non-tariff barriers, definitely. And exchange rate. The problem with exchange rate, you see, as an economist, dollar is the medium of transaction because it's the only currency in the world available. It's available because the US has been at the deficit with Europe, euro dollar, with the Middle East, oil, petrodollar, with Asia, Asia dollar. So, the transaction demand for dollar has kept the US dollar price and value up in spite of US having deficit. I think this is not a new idea, when they talked about this at IMF, the Bretton Woods, they try to develop the SDR so that the countries in the world would have currency as a medium of exchange. But that has not happened.
Yeah.
So, and the prime value of dollar difficult.
Yeah, but it's not just the transaction. It's not just the transactions demand.
Mm-hmm.
It's people want to hold dollar assets.
That's correct.
They want to hold treasury notes.
All kinds of demand. But I think you see, when you talk about other kind of demand, it's a denomination thing. But dollar as note available everywhere.
Yeah.
So easily available. You go to Cambodia, you go to Vietnam, you go to Laos, and so on. People prefer dollar more than their own currency.
Sure.
You see, so they need the dollar. You see? And if you don't have deficit, this dollar would not be available. I mean, if you have surplus, we have surplus. That we need to work on how to, how to really manage it. More suitable exchange rate for many countries.
Yeah, but I mean, the reason people want dollars is they think that they will hold value better than the baht or better than
precautionary and speculative and transaction, all of them.
Yeah, and if the people of the world or the financiers of the world decide they want fewer dollars in their portfolios, then the dollar will drop.
That's right.
Then the dollar will drop. But
so we need to have mechanism. You see, actually, if people can really settle their trade transaction partly by their own, by their own currency, like many of the central banks are trying to do at the moment, that would a little bit reduce the demand for dollar, but maybe not much. Eventually, that should happen. And I think with the new technology, with the new digital technology, it's easier to do this central bank to central bank transaction. That would help. So I hope what happened today. I'm a positive thinker, you see. I hope what happened today, instead of retaliation, we should think about how to really adjust the global system that would accommodate interests of more and more people. I hope that would happen.
Yeah, but I imagine what's going to happen, given the political antics of the administration saying that we're going to take back Panama, we're going to take Colombia.
That's another area. That's another issue.
we're going to make Canada the 51st state. That this administration has angered people and has put people politically in a corner where they will lose political power in France or Germany or Canada if they were to say, oh, let's open up our country to more American exports. Let's reduce our non-tariff barriers. I think it's more likely, like the central banker Mark Carney says, we will immediately retaliate, and here's the sectors in your red states that we're targeting, and China the same thing. And then with the psychology of this administration, they're going to say, oh, you did that, then we're going to increase your tariffs even more, which could lead us to this cycle that, as you and I remember as PhD students, Smoot-Hawley in the 1930s.
Remember, yeah. Yes, Dick, excellent. You see, we're not just talking about economic.
Yeah.
What I've been saying is about rationality in economic analysis. But then at this time, this current administration, the U.S. administration, It's bringing in other aspects, particularly boundary, particularly land, particularly political power into the game. So
Yes.
that would anger people. So when people get upset about it, that can be translated into economic policy. So therefore, instead of adjusting economic measure, economic policy rationally, they would adjust it emotionally also, which would would not be good at all. That I don't like. I subscribe to the Westphalia Treaty 1648 about boundary, about sovereignty and things like that. It's not good, It's creating a precedent for many of the countries who still have question about border. I hope very much that it will not go too far. In Southeast Asia, we never had border before, but after Second World War, we started to have border. But a lot of these borders are not clearly marked. Thailand, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, all this is not clearly marked. We have kept this in peace for a long time. But what US is doing, some of the country may start arguing that this is their land and so on. That's not good.
So I don't know if you follow a Chinese economist, Henry Hio Wang, and he wrote a piece in the South China Morning Post a couple of days ago, talking about the trilateral foreign ministers meeting in Tokyo. So Chinese Minister Wang Yi and South Korean minister and the Japanese minister.
Right.
And he concluded with, the three of us have more things in common than we do differences. And these things in common should trump our differences. And we should work together for prosperity, peace, and security. And
good point. I want to talk about
very good point. But these are two U.S. treaty allies talking with what the U.S. considers our greatest threat, China.
Yes.
And the fact of what this administration is doing, and as you said, how they're doing it, makes South Korea and Japan think
closer.
Maybe we should get closer to China.
I'm glad you mentioned this. If you recall, when you organized the seminar in Bali just last December, when we were talking about changes happening in Asia Pacific, and I was mentioning that one thing that the new administration would be the impact on Asia Pacific. And I differentiated between Pacific Asia and Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific include US and many other countries on that side of the Pacific. But Pacific Asia, I mean the Eastern, meaning China, Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia, and plus even part of the South Asia. I mentioned at the seminar there that number one, we are much better off than 50 years ago. Much better off because of this globalization. And number two, if you recall, that the impact of the US policies about the economy, about the politics and so on, would make Pacific Asia much more closer in terms of economic and political cooperation. And the three countries that you mentioned confirm what I said. And it will continue to happen. Today, we're starting to have this BIMSTEC, Thailand and the Western and South Asia country having meeting in Bangkok. That will be declaration, I'm sure. BIMSTEC has been slowed down for many years. I think they will start moving faster. And ASEAN become even more, much more united. Encouragement from all the leaders, in ASEAN to get closer, to become more united. And even this incident in Myanmar, may have positive impact on politics in Myanmar. Suddenly, Min Aung Hlaing, becoming more accommodating to other proposals, to the solution and so on. So, I said in Bali, you may remember that. We would become stronger. And we have the wealth now, much more than before. We can take care of ourselves much more than before. There's no need for us to fight. U.S. can get angry, fine. We will adjust to the anger of the U.S. I call it angry American, you may recall. The era of angry American used to be ugly American, then popular American, now angry American. So we will adjust until American become a little bit less angry. You cannot argue with angry people. No way.
Yeah.
You have to calm down and then wait for them to calm down.
Well, as a matter of fact, last week,
Yes.
in anticipation of our conversation, I went back to look at your Bali Forum presentation.
Yes.
And exactly what you're saying.
The last page.
What you're saying is that an external disaster or an external shock
Yes.
normally cause people to work together better. If there's already relationships and they're not starving and there's a level of wealth and prosperity.
That's right.
So the tsunami off of Thailand and Indonesia ended the civil war in Indonesia, ended the Aceh uprising. It was just too much was lost. They needed to come together, and they did. And hopefully this tsunami coming out of Washington will lead, as you say, to not retaliation against the U.S.
That's right. That's right.
Spiral, worse, but sort of we need to make better friends with our neighbors.
That's right.
We need to better integrate, and that is probably what's going to happen. But again, I think that the Canadians will retaliate. I think the Mexicans will not, because they just don't have the power to do it. But Western Europe, I think, will probably retaliate also. And then it's just a question whether that will bring some sense to Washington to say, okay, let's discuss these things.
Good point. And you said very good point. You see, we Asia, we always identify U.S., America, U.S., American being Western, being white, being Western. And we always identify U.S., Canada, U.S., Europe to be the same people to us. And if you consider yourself being Canadian, I think the Canadian would think of themselves as being white, Caucasian, European, Western, And when you're doing that to them, I'm sure they get angry. And when US is doing that to Europe, I'm sure Europe get angry. You are relative, you're cousins, You go back to your ancestor, you come from the same place. Why you do that? But in Asia, you see, we hope we're not doing that kind of thing, and therefore we think that this is a good opportunity for us to become even closer. We never really had this so-called fighting like what Europe had earlier on. So for so many years, Europe been fighting, but Asian countries, China, there was some conflict with India, but not at the border level. And the major war that we had was Japan moving into Korea and China for the reason that they wanted to industrialize, that they wanted to take over some of these resources from these countries, not because they did not like each other. See? So Europe and Asia, the civilization development is quite different. And therefore, I understand why these European and Canadian got angry with the American, because you think your cousin, your relatives doing this to you. But in Asia, we don't get angry with the American. We're not relative, we're not related to the American. That's my analysis, different how we react to Trump from those white country people.
Narongchai, thank you for that history lesson. But the essence of your presentation at the forum in Bali in December is the last page. And that last page, hopefully that the nations of the Pacific Asia will find ways to strengthen their bonds and make America less important to them. Economically.
For the time being, America will continue to be important, but for the time being, it will be, the important will stay and will become less and less. And we can survive, we can survive.
Yeah, I didn't mean unimportant, but somewhat less important. And therefore, your neighbors being more important to each other. And
That's right.
but that includes China and the
Yes.
United States, this administration in particular, but maybe both parties won't like China getting stronger by being closer with South Korea and Japan. So that'll create some tension. And we'll see how that goes.
Yes.
So, Dr. Narongchai, thank you for your
Yes.
time.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I confirm that I'm a positive thinker. I will think of opportunity to improve things. And I think this new challenge coming from Donald Trump, I try not to think of Donald Trump being the sole representative of the U.S.
On that very positive note,
Yes.
we're not all ugly. I'll let you go to work.
Hosted by Dick Drobnick, the Asia Pacific Business Forum podcast is produced by Dan Griffin of GG Films.